our next speaker, I've known of her or her for a very long time, and for some reason she never ages, and I'm not quite sure how she does that. But she has been a leader in selecting queens for us that will be more successful. Through Carniolan, she's traveled to Europe, Eastern Europe. She's done everything in order to help us so that we have better genetics, so that we can be more successful as beekeepers. And that all boils down to that one fertile female in the colony, doesn't it? The queen. And so I'm looking forward to her sharing not only that information, but information about her. And Sue and I were just talking about how all the speakers so far, it hasn't been charts and graphs. It's been that look into their journey, their personalities, how they overcame burdens and did it because of effort. And so I like this mixture of data and having real people talk to real people. So, big round of applause for Sue Cobey.
I wasn't quite sure how to approach this talk because I usually talk about. Oh, anyway. And I was thinking, like, what was the most fun experience early in beekeeping? And I think it was like walking into a swarm. You ever done that? You just have these bees, and they're amazing, wonderful. So I started with this picture. This is a young Jerry Wright and myself. We used to make these bee beards in Ohio. So I thought, well, okay, I'll start with that. That's where it came from. We did this quite often. We did it for classes and for bee organizations, different things like that. And a lot of this, it's a good teaching tool for showing bee behavior, how you got the pheromone language and how you can use that to control bees. So that was a really fun thing. We'd put these swarms, establish a swarm on a pole, and you train the bees. You shake them and have them reform. And by doing that, you could put another person there, and they could receive the bees. So we even did this to the provost of WSU as a fundraiser. It was pretty awesome. Anyway, that's a really fun thing to do. Like Barb, I just always was fascinated by insects. I used to catch these fireflies and just release them in my bedroom at night for the fun of it. I used to catch these or cut down these tent caterpillars and take it to grade school for show and tell, and they'd be crawling all over. My favorite thing was the butterfly. So anyway, that's kind of the early. I was really kind of introverted, shy as a child, and that was a really fun thing to do. I was always amazed that that little larvae I found on the rose bush could turn into a ladybug, or these caterpillars would turn into these beautiful butterflies. And some of those insects, they just look like jewelry. They're metallic, pretty, and so I changed my major from teaching to entomology. To my parents, they weren't really happy with that. How are you going to make a living doing that? At least if you were a teacher, you could make a living. I had some incredible mentors. Harry Laidlaw was he was a retired professor at UC Davis when I was there, and I don't know, I was a skinny little girl, just curious, but he showed me that little insemination device and kind of played with that with me, let me use it. And then I went to USDA and worked with John Harbaugh, who just really polished my skills with insemination. So between those, that kind of experience, just being in the right place at the right time, being curious about that funny little instrument, it just kind of led me into all of this. Not coming from a beekeeping background, my first experience was I just jumped into commercial beekeeping. I took a grew up on the East Coast, Pennsylvania, Delaware, and Mike Burgett, I took a student exchange to Oregon State University with Mike Burgett, took a beekeeping class, and I never went back. That was it. So he got me a job, commercial beekeeping in Northern California. And one of the main things we would do is install these mating nooks. So you'd put a cup of bees, a cup of sugar, queen cell. It was this room with red lights. I didn't have proper footwear. I didn't have boots. So I had like elephantitis from all the bee stings. I didn't want to say anything. You just kind of soak in a cold tub and, I can do this stuff, right? And then we'd take out these stacks of, you'd have these stacks of mating nooks. What they do is they put them in a cold room until the virgin emerges in there, so it's a stable unit. And then you put them out in the field. So I remember just carrying, I could take 4 of these off the truck. Guys are it's bundles of 6 or 8. And I know I was like kind of disrupting the whole routine there. But it was, I don't know, it was an experience. A really fun experience, I guess. I learned so much so fast. When I was at Davis, Page and Laidlaw were writing their closed population system, and it just seemed very practical. So we followed that. I hooked up with the major queen and down the road a little bit, and we decided we could do this. So we applied the closed population. I started a little bee business and applied that. He took pomology, so he wanted to have a kiwi vineyard. We were young, naive, a lot of dreams at the time, not very much money. But so we ran this business raising kiwi fruit and queen bees for about 10 years. And finally our accountant said, well, you're really not making any money here. You're about breaking even. So we wrote up a limited partnership and we got some investors. And then after about 10 years, we just dissolved it because it wasn't really profitable that way. We started carniolans. I decided that was a good thing to do because Italian bees were very common. And I thought, well, at least with my little instrument, I could keep them black. And then I noticed they seem to have a different production strategy. It's kind of a different bee as you got more carniolan in there. And we just selected carniolan from across the U.S., brought a little bit in from Canada, just back crossing and trying to get a more carniolan-like bee. So that was kind of the beginning of the new old carniolan. After our Bacchanali apiary, our kiwi vineyard bee venture, I went to Ohio State University and concentrated more on the breeding program there. Then moved it to UC Davis and WSU. I'm not sure these universities realize how much they supported the program, but as long as I could bring in a little bit of grant money to support students and just kind of maintain my own program, I was kind of under the wire because I didn't have a PhD. So that worked, and that's what we did for a long time. And it just became a teaching tool I started teaching classes on insemination because that was a big demand. Queen rearing, just kind of basic beekeeping type stuff. It was really nice to have that population as a teaching tool. You could show people how to run something like that. So this is kind of a little history of how it went. For about 10 years, we did this Bacchanali apiaries, and that was just establishing the carniolan population, selling production queens, kiwi fruit, things like that. And then we moved it on to these different Ohio State University. I was here for about 16 years. That was a good run. UC Davis, 2010. Not sure what I was thinking, but I hooked up with Steve Shepard, and for 2 years I was half-time UC Davis and half-time WSU, and it just got a little bit crazy. So I moved up to Washington State University with Steve Shepard, and he's a evolutionary biologist, molecular guy. He was really interested in bringing in Caucasian bees. I was really knocking on that door. My dream was to get pure Carnica, so that's what I kind of made that relationship. This is I've just turned my breeding program over to Strachan apiaries and Buzz's bees after many years. The hives are getting heavy. You say I haven't aged, but I feel it. These hives get heavier, and I'm slower out there. So, and it's time. It's time to pass it on to the next generation. So, these guys have run my bees for many years, especially Valerie Strachan. This is her son Philip and his family, and Buzz Landon and Nicole and their family are going to be offering. So if you want New World Carniolan breeders, don't call me anymore. It's kind of nice to let go of that. One of my dreams was to bring in that pure Carnica, and we tried that for about 2 years. I had Laidlaw supporting it, Rutner in Germany supporting it, and Strachan apiaries and Winter Honey Farm were the two big commercial beekeepers that we worked very closely with that help with the paperwork and trying to get all this stuff in. But it just the nature of the bureaucracy, I wasn't able to do it. So once about 2006, we were bringing in Australian bees to address the not having enough bees and almonds, so they claimed. And so I knocked on the door again, and I finally got a permit to bring in my little tube of semen, which I think would be that big of a deal. In 2006, I moved back to Davis in 2007, and then hooked up with Steve Shepard, and we really pushed that button because he wanted to also bring in the Caucasica, which we did. So we brought in the semen from the German Carnica Association, and this is amazing. They have pedigrees that go back to, I don't know, the 40s or 50s. The Germans are very rigid in how they cross things, so that was pretty exciting. We went to Slovenia. Slovenia is a country where it's all Carnica. It's a pretty amazing country because you have lots of small farms. There's a few pictures in here. The bees are just beautiful. And I also went to Poland. Poland is a really interesting country because they've mass-produced instrumentally inseminated queens for production hives. It's the only place in the world that does that. This is my first few tubes of semen coming from. This is Ralph Buchler in Germany, and this is a good friend of mine, David Yonke. He's in New Zealand, and he was transitioning from Italian to Carniolan stock. So I went over there with him a few years earlier, horribly jealous of his ability to bring that back. But but I went around and looked at the bees and spent a little time over there, which was super fun. So I finally got my little bit of semen in here. This was brought into Ohio for the first year, so that was really exciting. These are different places. We collected Carnica. Again, this is Germany with David Yonke. This is the Polish group. This woman here she heads the research lab now, but she does massive numbers of insemination, teaches insemination, and I'm always my dream to work with somebody like that because it's always kind of giving. There's not many places I can go and get that kind of input, and their system is very different from my system. So comparing notes like that was really fun. This is Slovenia with the bee house. This is Steve Shepard, Brandon Hopkins, a local beekeeper. They have these bee houses, which are really fun. This is upstairs. They have this building where the upstairs, there's beehives in the top, and the downstairs is a little kitchen bedroom. It's way up in the mountains, so they take turns visiting up there. The reason for that is these are the little mating nooks. You can't see that picture very well, but it's in a big cage because there's local bears there. So they cage the mating nooks up. Yeah, these bee houses are pretty cool. And they're so well designed. You can just roll out these frames. Yeah. I should have more pictures of that. But the designs on here are they're folkloric pictures. They're religious pictures. Some of them are quite funny. There's like I don't know, women sticking out her tongue in a funny way and falling over a barrel, which is kind of just demonstrating the gossipy things of women or something. Or there's just some of those you're going to take a double take and look at these pictures. They're pretty hysterical. Very traditional, old. This is the front of the hive, and you go inside this building, and you work inside. You can pull these frames out, and see that it's a small building, but right here is there's a bed in here and a small little kitchen where the beekeeper can stay. And underneath this bed is a beehive. So he'll rent this out for therapeutic reasons of some kind. Yeah, I don't know. That's a thing now, to sleep on a bed of bees, I guess. Very warm? Yeah, I guess it would be. Yeah, I'm sure it would be. Yeah, so this is Slovenia. Here's another one of these bee houses. This one doesn't have the pretty different paintings on it. Some of these, this is one is set up a trailer. You can just move very easy somewhere stationary. Here's a better picture of the mating nooks inside the cage. He's pulling these out. This is the most. This is what they use for smokers. It's just like a pressed wood. They lay it. And what I'm wearing, that is the most protective bee gear I used in that whole country the time I was there. That is how gorgeous, wonderful these bees are. So we went back to his office little store. These beekeepers, they'll have maybe 100 or 200 colonies, and they can make a living on that. They'll sell mead and honey and candles and bee equipment, all kinds of bee supply type things. So went back to his little store there. I set up my equipment. We're just collecting semen because my permit was only for semen only, which I think as it should be. It's much safer. You can bring in viruses, but you're less likely to bring in pests and diseases. And then once we bring that germplasm in, it goes into a quarantine station. And I send a sample of the semen back to the USDA. They test it for viruses. And then we also test the progeny that resulting from that semen before it's released. So it's a process, and it's in an isolated area surrounded by wheat fields in Washington State. So by the time you get through all those steps, these are little 5-frame nooks coming out into the winter season that I'm supposed to keep alive for the next year. This is a toast of meat. After we collected all the semen, he gave me a little toast of meat, which was really kind of special. This is Gosha, the inseminator, Dr. Benevirsky. She's pretty amazing. I went over there. This is Boyke. I don't know if you know that name, but he's I guess you'd compare him with Dr. Harry Laidlaw, just one of those pioneers in bee breeding and instrumental insemination. So I was really keen I'd met him at meetings somewhere, but to really visit him. And he was long retired by the time I went over there. He sent a student, Jacob, to spend a season with me at UC Davis. So it just seemed like a good thing to do was return that visit. Of course, they took me all over the country. It was great, really great fun. This is Dr. Vilde. He's a bee researcher, and he said that he doesn't make enough money as a bee researcher, so he set up this huge commercial queen production business with inseminated queens, and he pulls in students from all over the world, trains them in queen rearing and insemination. So yeah, pretty cool. So that was kind of a special visit. This is Dr. Vilde's mating duck. He had this elaborate system of rocks and sticks that he put on top of the nook that indicated the status of the queen in there. It was a little crazy, but yeah. So look at these numbers: 50 to 80,000 instrumentally inseminated queens a year they do, and this was subsidized by the government. So it was actually cheaper to get an instrumentally inseminated queen versus a natural. Goofy as that. But it just demonstrates the production level, not the production level, but the performance level these queens can do. They've all often got a bad rap, and that's really related to injury, infection, not giving them a big enough semen dosage. I think these queens actually do better, can live longer if they're given adequate care and attention. Again, on the Wings of Bees, they've taken me all over the world. I was just following things that were fun to do. I was more comfortable outside than just playing outside with the insects. But they've really taken me all over the world. I'd be asked to give these talks, different places. I try to do this in the language, French or Spanish or whatever it is. Trip over yourself doing that sometimes. Or my friend Miguel here, this is in Mexico, he would put his own interpretation on that talk sometimes. I don't know. Still great fun. Some symposiums. These are posts. This was a conference in Chile I did with Mike Burgett, and it was really fun because he was really the first person that introduced me to bees. I took his first beekeeping class, and here I am in Chile with him, giving a talk. So that was pretty cool. Workshops. I started getting into these, teaching this, because there just wasn't a place to go to learn insemination, and I did these different places all over the world. What you need for these classes is a lot of virgins and drones, and beekeepers aren't used to raising that. I mean, they can raise cells, they can raise naturmated queens, but virgins and drones, every class I've done abroad, I haven't had enough material. People will do funny things. Like they'll try to merge the queen cells upside down. Or they'll shake drones from the brood nest, and they're all babies. You know what babies do? They poop. Yeah, so not always fun. Yeah, these are just some classes. Oh, here, this is David Yonke in New Zealand. He's kind of my, I don't know, he did the same thing there in New Zealand. He's actually Canadian by birth. He married a New Zealand woman and ran a big commercial closed population, very similar to mine, so we kept in touch pretty well. And had kind of the same issues. Initially, if you look at that closed population, what it meant to be is you have these several satellite populations, and everybody pulls the best resources, you redistribute, try to pick out the best. I tried to do that with some of the commercial queen producers in California. He tried to do the same thing in New Zealand, and it's a different realm. It's really hard to get the feedback or the follow through and that kind of thing. So as my husband said, you have to run it like a dictator. So that's kind of what I've done, which makes it really hard to let go of. When you go through those hives, and the queens are just gorgeous and beautiful, it's a reward in itself. I got to see a lot of amazing wildlife over there on these trips. I went down to the south part of New Zealand and did some work down there, and I had this amazing trip along the shore looking at all these different animals. Australia, went to Australia several times. Um, um, yeah, again, the wildlife, these are stingless bees. Um, this is Megan Mahoney and Katie Lee. We went over there for a conference recently, and we took a little extra time, went out to Aries Rock, which was amazing. That is really the natural color. It's just an amazing area. So yeah, lots of. This is a really special person. This is Liz Frost. She walked into the bee lab at UC Davis and just said, "Oh, can I volunteer?" and made herself indispensable. She's now working in Australia, running the breeding program, working for the government, teaching insemination classes, setting up a breeding program. Mexico, went down to Mexico quite a few times. This is the mayor of a small town, Cotebec. I was explaining to her that you need lots of drones for one queen, and she got very excited. She said, "Yes, I need lots of drones." It was just really cute. They like a lot of ceremony. They would give me these wonderful certificates of recognition or whatever that is. Lots in Mexico. This is another good friend, Marco Moots. He runs a large commercial operation. He had the whole town working with beekeepers. I would ship him semen for many years. He recently died. I think his kids are taking over now. But just a lot of good exchange in that kind of thing. I would like, instead of sending them breeder queens, I would always like to send them semen because it's safer, it's easier to move, and it forces them to really learn the insemination, do it. So it's kind of a motivation there too. A bunch of crazy beekeepers drinking. Lots of fun times in Mexico. I love that country. This is my good friend Zulima. Again, she organized several classes down there for me. She's a very good beekeeper, does insemination. We were going on a little, she took me to this archaeological place, and we stopped along the road. We saw this sign, and we stopped in, and this guy had a whole bunch of stingless bees to look at. Right now, we're in the moment of trying to hire Zulima at WSU. There's a lot of paperwork, bureaucracy trying to get her from Mexico up here. I'm hoping we can hire her to organize our breeding program. This is a class she organized. She made this little logo. I thought that was really cute. my husband couldn't figure out what it was. The pregnant microscope. This was an amazing trip. In South Africa, they were having trouble with capensis. Was getting they brought, and on the tip of Africa is capensis. It's the bee that reproduces parthenogenically, and they're bringing squidlata, the African bee, down in here, and they were getting, the capensis was getting in these hives, and you get this kind of anarchy where you get the capensis worker bees will go into these African hives and start laying eggs and taking over and mimicking the queen. So they destroy the queen. Anyway, it's a crazy story, but they wanted to try to do insemination. So I went down there and spent some time. Amazing wildlife. I booked a safari there, and something happened. None of the people showed up, so I ended up going out with the guide person by myself, which was awesome. Because we would just sit and watch things where with a tour you want to tick off all the different animals you see. We just sit there and observe, and he was quite keen. He would cue me into the behaviors and different things. So that was a pretty good trip. Then they had this little a little park. Did some classes in Costa Rica, Jamaica. Those were kind of frustrating. Well, a concern about African bees there, but they're just the resources. Oh my goodness. This was probably the most frustrating place I've ever been. I went to Abu Dhabi to do an insemination class. This is Dennis Anderson. He's Australian, and he was over there for a couple of years trying to get a breeding program. They wanted to design their own bee, which it's not really possible. So I work with these women. They would hold a drone and just start screaming. These were highly educated women. They had masters and PhDs, but in lab techniques or other things. They weren't beekeepers. Only the guys were beekeepers. So yeah, but they figured the women could do the lab work, right? So they weren't used to buzzing insects. So that was a bit bizarre. Here she's holding a drone. And then they had this nice luncheon meal thing, right? So they pushed me to the head of the line. I sat down, and I didn't realize this side is for men and this side is for women. So all of a sudden, all the men are sitting here. They didn't know what to do with me. I was kind of an honorary man or something. Yeah, we had a couple different venues like that, and it just was. I will. After that experience, I will never go back to one of those countries. It was just so, not so much like I was treated very well, but I just, the suppression of the women in those countries, I couldn't handle. I just couldn't handle. One of them dressed me up so I could go visit the temple here. So I made a point of, trying in public, keeping my hair covered, long sleeves. This particular, I didn't really realize what was going on there. I'm dressed in blue jeans here. I was ready to wear these that day. Anyway, that was probably the most difficult venture I've taken. This was really fun. I had a group of Japanese beekeepers come over. This is an amazing woman right here. Her passion was to raise bees. She's in the northern part of Japan, so she organized her crew here and brought them over. And then I went back there. This was just before COVID, like December before COVID. So I went back there. There was a little convention they had. I never knew what I was eating over there, but it was all very delicious. And it's so wonderful. They just have all these tiny little plates, and they're so beautiful. Oh my God, what a wonderful country! Yeah, no, so fun. When I organized for her to come back and tour the California producers, but COVID hit. Okay, well, this is the WSU germplasm collection. Steve Shepard and I got permits from USDA to bring in the Carnica, but also Caucasian bees, Caucasica. This is a picture of Brandon in our hotel room with liquid nitrogen running down the hallway. We were also, yeah, we were also trying to cryopreserve semen. The first couple loads of this stuff, I was pretty protective. I want the fresh stuff. I want to make sure it works, but now I have total confidence in him. It's to the point you have the same success rate you do as with cattle or horses or other animals, but how many sperm do you need for a cow versus a wheat? That's the difference. There is some damage there, so it's enough to, the success is enough to recover from the tank, liquid nitrogen tank, but it's not enough to keep a productive colony. You get some spotty brood, some of the sperm is damaged. But that was an amazing place to go. Lots of different, these are just way up high in the country. It was really a beautiful place. They have these towers. They used to shoot arrows at the Russians from these towers. And it was late season, so they're kind of kicking the drones out. They take them way up in the hills for the honey production. Here's Steve here, drones. It was absolutely gorgeous up there. Heavy traffic, not an easy place to get to. But they're oftentimes in the roads. There were just local people moving their cattle. You'd find these. I don't know if you can see that, but see this hog here. It's got a piece of wood. That's so it can't get through the fences. All the animals were free. They would put fences around their crops. We were pretty happy to see this guy. their roads looked like this. They were kind of scary. If you know Steve Shepard, he's a bit of a genius, but he's a crazy guy. He would pick the most odd thing in a restaurant to eat. He would go to places that we weren't allowed. Um, we were told some of these places it was off limits for U.S. people. He would always, and we travel. He has no sense of time. So oftentimes, you didn't know how long it would take to get somewhere. Or if you were gonna, we got up here, and there's no place to eat. There's no restaurants. There was one place we could spend the night. They had 2 rooms, and we had 5 guys and me. So I got my own room, and all the guys slept together with the snoring and all that stuff. I whispered to Brandon. I said, Brandon, if you want to sneak in and use that bed, that's okay. This is collecting drones. We were just driving down the road. We saw this priest, and we stopped in. And again, it's late season. They're starting to kick these drones out. We saw them kicking these drones out. At this point, they're mature and they're good. So we stopped and collected a bunch of drones. He owns the apiary. These usually have a lot of religious symbolism for them, and he would hire beekeepers to stay there and take care of the bees. So another place we went to along the road and stopped. Probably shouldn't have been doing that, but we got out. The local beekeeper taking care of these hives was obviously drunk, and we said, "Can we just collect a few drones off the entrance here? You won't mind?" And we had the back of the truck open, and there's liquid nitrogen tanks and microscopes, and this car pulls up. It's a bunch of, I think they were Russian guys. There's a lot of communication between the beekeeper and these Russians. And then all of a sudden I noticed that each of us are separated by one of these guys, and our tour guide is saying, get in the truck, we're leaving right now. And I'm thinking, okay, well, I could pick up a frame of bees and throw at them or something. But it was very tense. We were not supposed to be up in that area. But of course, Steve, thinking that we would get the best quality bees in this area, we just went. So, yeah, it was kind of scary. Turkey, this was another beautiful country. Again, looking for Caucasian bees. They're pretty well organized. They have big commercial operations there. But they also have some log hives. You can imagine the beauty of these countries. It's just absolutely gorgeous. Every place we went, people are really proud of their bees. They're really happy to share. When you're just asking for drones, they're more than happy. All of them tried to give us queens to take home, but our permit was limited, and we wanted to honor that. So that was kind of frustrating, not being able to bring the queens home. But anyway, it's fine. Yeah, just a lot of them have them up in these houses again because the bears are an issue. This is a big apiary, lots of queen mating. But here's some of the log hives. This is, you can't see that very well. That's inside of the log hives. These were, the honey from this was highly valued because you wouldn't get big crops because it's really cold up there, so they'd eat a lot of it just to maintain themselves. This is one of the honey shops. And also these rounds from the log hives were always much more expensive because people thought they were more highly valued because they're from the log hives. Viagra, that was pretty funny. After the Viagra thing, that was some kind of a miticide. I'm not sure what that was, some kind of miticide, but we got a hoot out of that. Here's the log hives for sale. Yeah, the variety of honey here was amazing. And yeah, it was all price. I didn't quite understand how the pricing was, but the prices were all over the place. We also went to Italy to bring in Italian bees, Ligustica. The mission here was to diversify the U.S. gene pool. A big pool of that was Italian, so of course we had to collect Italian bees. Neither Steve or I were very into that. I wanted my Carnies, he wanted his Caucasians. So we went to a couple different, he had a good friend over there and took us around, and we collected some stock. Then we brought it back and gave it to some of the beekeepers. Jackie Park was our biggest critic. She said, "Oh, these are dark, pissy." And I think, "Oh dear." So we took her over there to pick out what she liked. So, and she was pretty critical. This is Cecilia Costi. She's a researcher in one of the beekeeping stations there. They run a nice breeding program. So that was kind of our first stop, trying to up the game a little bit, try to show Jackie something she would be impressed with. That was the goal. And this is, she fell in love with this guy's bees. They were nice color, nice and gentle. We collected semen, and they loved Jackie. They made it this nice big poster for her. There's all the beekeepers, took us out to dinner. Wonderful meals, good memories. So that was fun. It was way more fun to have Jackie there. I went back another year and did a talk there, and Fausto took me on this tour of Rome. The bees are a symbol of hope. So if you're a sculptor and you put bees on the sculpture, you get paid more money. So we went through all over and looking for these symbols of bees, and they were everywhere when you really start looking on the ceilings of these paintings and just everywhere. I think Jackie went the following year, did that conference and a similar type of tour. Yeah, it's pretty amazing to see all that. I've been in Rome before. We run around there, but I didn't see as many bees as Foxter's quite a historian. So that was really fun to go with someone that knew the area. We went to, this is a good friend of Steve Shepard's. He wanted us to put some of the mellifera, the black bee, in the tank because it's under a lot of pressure. So we went to this little island with him and collected drones. We put an excluder over these were just feral bees on the rocks. Put an excluder over there, collect out the drones. These were test bees. They're like the German black, but they were pretty bees. Anyway, that was pretty interesting. And the group of beekeepers there were very protective. They wanted to be assured that these bees were putting it away for them, not to be taken to the U.S. and distributed or mixed into something very possessive. Oh my God, the food. This is a pig roast, a very traditional thing in Slovenia. This is Zulima's husband, Felipe. He took me to this restaurant where they make old Mexican foods, and we're eating agave worms. This is agave worm taco, and all kinds of different insects they would serve. Sushi, Japan. This is in the Isle of Crocs, seafood. My God, there were just things in here, snails and all of it super yummy. Japan, again, you just have these incredible meals. She had this big banquet thing while I was there for me, just to meet some of the local beekeepers and stuff. That was just super fun, just amazing experiences like that. Okay, my goals. This whole thing, I called it On the Wings of Bees because it was just following the bees. I had no specific career goal. I just knew I wanted to do something working outside. Entomology was mostly pesticide control type of job, so I went into bees because that's something I could work with insects outside. My mentors, Laidlaw and John Harbaugh, I like being around academia. I think what I'm good at is taking the research and applying it, making it practical. And that's pretty much what I did with this. And then got into the training techniques just because people wanted to learn that. I got a few requests, and that just developed into what it is. And then hooking up with WSU, the cryopreservation work. It takes a lot to get that semen into the tank and take it out. Of course, insemination is a critical aspect of that. So helping with that, I think it's there's a lot of people across the world working on that type of improving that technique. I think it's really going to, if you look at how we have, what, 26, 27 different subspecies of honeybees threatened. Commercially, we use 3 or 4. So there's a big need to maintain that. There's a global interest in that. So the preservation techniques, I think, are really important for that kind of conservation. I think this is what I'm most proud of. Some of my students. Liz Frost, again, she's in Australia, working, teaching insemination, running a big breeding program. Nick Yeager was a student of mine in Ohio. He's now running the mushroom studies at WSU. We hope to have they're selecting Brismidia. It's a mushroom strain that is more, they did a bunch of cage studies selecting for a strain that's moisture tolerant and very virulent against mites and viruses. So hopefully in the next few years you may have another tool coming off from that. Garrett Dodds, he was a student of mine in Ohio again, and he's now running the Hilo program. He's at the USA Baton Rouge. He's taken over the Hilo VSH program. Very good inseminator, good breeder, good beekeeper. This is Megan Mahoney. She's up here too with Zalima and I. She did an internship with me. She learned the insemination. Now she runs a commercial with her partner, a commercial operation that goes from Texas to North Dakota. No, she's done a really good job. She's also collecting dark stock from a lot of different places. Some of her customers in Minnesota, North Dakota, California. So she's making a dark minded bees. It'll be like a carnelian Caucasian combination. But she used to work for the Bee Informed team. A lot of good experience, up and coming. So remember that name. She'll be around doing some good stuff. Dave Noble, he runs Redbeard Bees in Ohio. You know this guy? Yeah, I just spent a couple days with him in Ohio down there. He's teaching beekeeping classes. Again, another student of mine in Ohio that I'm really proud of. Billy Sink, he was in Ohio for a while too. I was there for a long time. So he worked for PAM or Project APSM for a little bit. He's moved on and working somewhere else, but he went up to California. Enrique Estrada, good friend in Mexico that's learned insemination, and he's traveled all over South America teaching insemination as well. So yeah, just really fun, special people. Really proud of these people. So I just, to be a part of their lives and that push them in that direction has been super. Right now, my mission, I think, is just passing this on. I'm going to do more educational materials, less drug beekeeping, though when the spring hits, I don't know if I can not do that. Anyway, these are some video sessions we did. We've got 3 videos out, one on selection, one on insemination, and one on cryopreservation. These are free online. You can probably find it pretty easy. This is my wedding picture. I ended up with a head queen man at the beekeepers down the road, and we started back at Valley Aviars. He's my cook, my fix-it man, my dog handler. My neighbor asked him. He said, "Well, what good is she? She doesn't cook. She doesn't make babies. She's never home." But he's put up with a lot of that. He kind of went on in a different area after we solved the business. Yeah, I just found this one. It's all about this passion and determination. I think every one that's been up here is demonstrated that. This is an article that was in Scientific America. These are barn swallows, and there's been like over 1,000 publications about these barn swallows, the behavior, the males singing songs, until this one woman said, "Hey, the female birds sing too." So I just thought that was really cute. It's just the different perspective, digging in a little different area, I think is more what women tend to do. Yeah, this is an old quote I found from John Harbaugh, which I thought was pretty interesting. One of my major mentors. He said, from my perspective, the women who have succeeded in apiculture and have done so because they were better than their male counterparts, I don't think they received any special privileges. And no privileges, but you've had to fight for that a bit, I think. I remember setting up California when we first had our business. I had this little table, my insemination device, some little flyers in there, trying to sell my queens. And I remember going to the bathroom and my flyers, those were 25 cents a piece. Devastating. I just, again, I had some really good teachers, really good mentors. And here's another funny story. We'd go to these Beekeepers meetings. Jackie knows these people. This was before your time. All these guys sitting around the table, big burly guys, and Tim, when he would leave me there, he would go to the other side of the room and just leave me there. And I'm like, oh God, little skinny girl. And they'd all be talking about trailer hitches. And I'm just sitting, I don't know anything about trailer hitches. So I thought, well, I'm either going to be totally ignored or I need to change this conversation. So I just read some paper, something about queens, and I mentioned that. So that gives me credibility. So it took a while, but over time, these guys they're all good friends now. Their kids have taken over their operations. Anyway, that's it.